Makkot Daf Yomi Makkot, common decency, שהיה ללמוד derech erettz. And the common decency is not so common, and that's the question: is why isn't it so common? Is derech erettz something you learn, or is it something innate that you're meant to have? This piece of Gemara, apart from unpacking a very weird piece of Chumash with the story of AVRAHAM and AVIMELECH, as I was finishing the sugya, just one word stood out at me, and that was enormously powerful, and I'll share it with you. Let's go through the story in Bereshis first. So Avraham goes to the Negev, and there he encounters AVIMELECH. We're told that Avraham says about Sarah that she is his sister. And so we assume that AVIMELECH asked who she is. He didn't go around advertising, meet my sister. Clearly AVIMELECH must have said, who is she? And he said, she's my sister. AVIMELECH sends a mission out to her and takes her to the palace with the intention of marrying her. Hashem comes to AVIMELECH. This is so serious that Hashem himself appears to AVIMELECH in a dream. How could you do this, AVIMELECH? She's a married woman. You're a king. Don't you know that this is not allowed? This is a capital offense. You're going to die for this. AVIMELECH lo karav eleha, and AVIMELECH hadn't touched her and didn't. Vayomer Hashem hagoy gam tzadik tarog. What do you mean I'm going to be killed for this? This is the first I hear that she's married. She didn't have a ring on her finger, and that in that part of the world, unmarried women also covered their hair, so there was no way I could know she was married. And he, Avraham, your great favorite son, told me she's his sister. Are you going to just kill a goy, even if he's a tzaddik? Is that what you did with the people of the flood and the people of Bovel as well? Do you just kill non-Jews because you don't like them? If they've done nothing wrong, what have I done wrong? He told me she's his sister. And she confirmed it. I did this absolutely innocently. Yeah, I know that you did it innocently. Really? You knew that he did it innocently, so why did you get so mad at him a few moments ago? What was that about? I've saved you from sinning. You haven't sinned yet, I'll save you. So what did Hashem mean when he said, you're going to die for this woman that you've taken? But now return the wife of the man, because he's a Navi. Really? And if he weren't a Navi, you wouldn't have to return him. Only Nevi'im get their wives back. And nobody else does. What does that mean? And although we might read it as ki navihu v'yitzpalel ba'adcha v'chaya, he's a Navi and a prophet and he'll pray for you. But if you look at the trop, that's not how it's read, and you'll see in the sugya that's not how it's read. It's v'ata hashev eshet ha'ish ki navihu. You must return him because he's a prophet. And if you don't give him back, then you're going to certainly die. That's the parasha of Chumash. In the Gemara, we have a machlokes between Rava and Abaya, and Rav Chisda is involved in it as well, whether a person who is omer mutar, a person who is under the impression that something is permissible, and he does a wrong thing, is that karov lemezid? Is that almost deliberate? How responsible are you for not knowing that something is prohibited? Or do we say potter because it's anusu? You didn't know, you didn't do anything wrong, and you wouldn't have done wrong had you known. So how can you be held responsible for doing wrong in a situation where you didn't know? Asks Abaya to Rava. Rava is the one who says that saying ignorance is not an answer. It's karov lemezid. Asks Abaya to Rava, what about the case of AVIMELECH? Explains Rashi, Gemara's assumption here is shohodelo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem accepted his answer. He said, Rimoni Shalom, I didn't know she was married. And Hashem says, yeah, I realized that you didn't know. And you're fortunate that I held you back. So Hashem is accepting his answer. That means, Alma Anusu. So you see that Hashem accepts that he's an honest, that this is beyond his control. Answers the Gemara, Hatam Ka Mahadri. No, there's an answer. The story goes on, the narrative goes on. And now the Gemara unpacks it so beautifully. The key is in that difficult last pasuk, and now return the man's wife because he's a prophet. Says the Gemara, Eshet navihu de tehader de lav navi lo tehader. Does he only have to return his wife because he's a Navi? Elo kidoma Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani was a very great darshan. He was an Amoyer in Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Lod. And a lot of the droshes, when it comes to understanding Chumash, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani was the expert. The Omar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Omar Rabbi Yonason, he was a Talmud of Rabbi Yonason, and he says in his Rebbe's name, this is the conversation. If you really want to understand what was going on here between Hashem and AVIMELECH, look how privileged we are. The rest of the world has the Chumash. They open the Chumash, they open the Bible, they read the story. How on earth do you make any sense of the story? And I don't know what they do with it. They just carry on reading the next page. I don't know what you do with it. But we've got Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, who's learned from Rabbi Yonason what really happened in that conversation. No, you've got to return the wife, no matter whether he's a Novi or not, it makes no difference, you return her immediately. Who amar li achoti? And you said, Avimelech, it's not your fault because he told you it was his sister? Navihu, don't forget, Avram is a Novi. Umimcha lamad, he knew what your intentions were. When you asked and said, Shalom Aleichem Reb Avram, and who is this beautiful lady with you? He knew why you were asking. When you meet somebody and a guest comes to town, you say, have you got a place to stay? Have you got a place to eat? First thing out of your mouth is not, who's this beautiful young lady with you? Do you ask, who is this lady? Is it your wife? So he knew why you were asking that. And he knew that if she was his wife, he would kill him. Avimelech wouldn't have taken a married woman, but murder, that was accepted in that time, in that place. From here you see that even a non-Jew, this is a universal law, is guilt. It's a capital offense. To take the wife of somebody else is a capital offense, even if he thought it was mutar shaya lelmod velo lamad. He should have learned. What should he have learned? Did he not know that you can't take a married woman? That he knew. What was he supposed to learn that he didn't know? Avram misled him. What should he have learned? He asked and he was given a false answer, and he acted on the false information. What should he have learned? There's an amazing Rashi. Says Rashi, lo deredvav sheshiv lo tshuva shechav mitashenu tzadik bedavar shaya lo lilmod derech eretz kidem mefarish va'azil. As the Gemara goes on to say, mikan shebenach shaya lo lilmod v'lo lamad. That's talking about derech eretz. He should have learned derech eretz. What's the derech eretz he should have learned? He should have learned the derech eretz to know you don't ask a person about who the young lady is with them. That's not the first question that you ask. You meet somebody, you make sure they've got a place to stay. It's not derech eretz. You meet a stranger and say, who is the young lady with you? That's not the thing to do. He should have known that. Asks the Ritva, our friend the Ritva is accompanying us through this Masechta in a most wonderful way. Says the Ritva, it seems from Rashi, that what is he guilty of? What's his offense? Is his offense that he took sorrow? That can't be an offense because he did that innocently. He thought she was unmarried. So what is his offense according to Rashi? His offense is his ignorance. You should know derech eretz, and he would be put to death for not knowing the derech eretz. That's what it should be. And then the Ritva asks various questions, and he says, firstly, how does Rava work up with that? And secondly, where do we find that there's a mitzvah for Bnei Noach to learn derech eretz? On Daf Nun Vav, it lists all the things that a Ben Noach has to know, that a non-Jewish person, a universal principle of what people need to know from a societal point of view, and it doesn't say derech eretz as one of them. And therefore the Ritva learns that Avimelech would be guilty of taking sorrow, because had he not asked who she was, Avram wouldn't have had to say, she's my sister. If Avram wouldn't have said she's my sister, he would have assumed she might be his wife, and he wouldn't have touched her. So the whole thing emerged from his lack of derech eretz. His lack of derech eretz caused Avram to realize what his intention was. Realizing what his intention was, Avram had to tell a lie in order to protect himself and Sarah. And And as a result of that, AVIMELECH nearly comes to a terrible avera. But at the end of the day, ki hu hita atzmo b'shelo lamad derech eretz. What Hashem is saying, don't blame it on Avram. Avram did what he had to do under the circumstances. What are the circumstances? You asked an inappropriate question. Why did you ask an inappropriate question? Because you had no derech eretz. You should have had derech eretz, and you wouldn't have asked the inappropriate question. Therefore, if a Ben Noach does any of the 7 Noachide laws in innocence, he doesn't know that it's forbidden, he's still responsible because he should have known. Because the 7 Noachide laws, according to the Ritva, are laws of derech eretz. And so those laws that are included on Daf Nun Vav, those are all laws of derech eretz. According to Rashi, he's actually put to death. The capital offense is not having derech eretz. That's the capital offense. The word that jumped out at me as I'm learning the sugya is hayalo lilmod instead of hayalo ladat. Why doesn't the Gemara say hayalo ladat? He should have known this. Everybody knows that you're not allowed to kill people. Everybody knows that you're not allowed to take somebody else's wife. Everybody knows that the first thing you ask a stranger is not who's the lady with you. That he should have known. The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara says hayalo lilmod. If hayalo lilmod, if one ought to have learned derech eretz, that means somebody ought to have taught derech eretz. That means derech eretz is not innate. Derech eretz has to be studied. It has to be learnt. It has to be taught. And that's why derech eretz, common decency, isn't common, because it's not innate. There are societies as there where it was okay to murder. People didn't think there was anything wrong. Law of the jungle. If I'm stronger than you and I've got the power and I don't like you, or you've got the woman I want or the house I want, I'll kill you. That was their way of doing things in certain parts of the world at certain periods of history. And so with more subtle things, you meet somebody and you say, who is she? In Hollywood, that's kind of a normal practice. You meet somebody at the Oscars and he's 95 and she's 30, and you say, who's the beautiful young lady with you? You don't assume that it's his wife, or maybe you do. It's okay practice. It's not derech eretz, it's not innate. Derech eretz has to be taught. And there are 2 ways that derech eretz is taught. The one is it's taught by societal feedback. And that's one of our big difficulties today, is that so many young people, not only young people anymore, live their lives virtually. And in the virtual world, there isn't that social feedback. So you're not being taught derech eretz. In the physical world, if you do something which is not derech eretz, you kind of get the message, this is not the way to behave. People give you a look. People stop associating with you. People might even say something to you. But in the virtual world, what's the worst that will happen? They'll stop liking you. You won't even notice they've stopped. Thousands of people like you, and one person stops liking you or following you. You don't even notice. There's no feedback. And so young people are growing up. We're seeing it with young people who grew up in COVID, where their whole developmental period was virtual, and they weren't getting that feedback, that they actually don't understand. In the whole return to the office movement, we've seen that people coming back to the office have no clue how to behave in the office. They just don't know how to interact with people, how to interact with a boss, how to interact face-to-face with a customer. They don't even know how to do that, because they weren't taught. You'll say, isn't it innate? Don't you just know these things? See from the Gemara, no. You don't just know these things. These things have to be taught. And if they're taught societally, and they're taught by parents and by teachers, it's the parents' responsibility, it's the parents' obligation, not just to educate the child in terms of formal education, but derech eretz. And it's something so serious that from a universal perspective with a Jew, it's a little different, because a Jew has to learn from Torah, not just from derech eretz. But for the world, derech eretz kadma Torah means that derech eretz was there as a universal law. The Torah was given to the Jews at Sinai, but derech eretz was given to all of mankind. And who taught derech eretz? In the yeshiva of Shem ve'Ever, what did they teach? Shem ve'Ever lived in the time of Noach, and after Noach, the time of Avram. What were they teaching in yeshivas? Did they have Shas? They didn't have Shas. Did they have Chumash? They didn't have Chumash. Did they have Shulchan Aruch? There was no Shulchan Aruch. There was no Mesilas Yesharim or Shari Tshuva or Choves Avos. What were they teaching? Teaching derech eretz. Derech eretz is a whole system of behavior which is handed down from Adam all the way down, and an individual has to learn derech eretz. Shaya lo lilmod. The obligation of every person, every human being, is to learn derech eretz. And derech eretz is not societally dependent. Derech eretz is global, it's universal. There's a fundamental derech eretz that applies everywhere, and Avimelech ought to have known that. And according to Rashi, for not knowing that, there's capital punishment. And according to the Ritva, if not knowing that leads to an offense, for that there's capital punishment. But either way, the lack of understanding of knowing derech eretz is something so important. We touched on this topic a year ago in Bava Metzia on Daf Pei Zayin, and there we talked about the derech eretz that is the case. We had the Ben Ish Chai teaching, and we had it paskin lahaloche in the Aruch HaShulchan. If a person's staying with somebody else in a home, you greet the woman of the home. You don't say, I don't speak to women. You greet, you inquire, you're staying in somebody's home. That's derech eretz. So the derech eretz is to know when to engage and when not to engage. How to engage with different people. That's derech eretz. And that's something you teach a child. How to engage. You don't just let the child develop and grow. No, he's just a child. It's just a child. It's not just a child. That's the time that we have the opportunity to teach hilchos derech eretz, to teach a child that common decency, which after all is not so common at all.